Okay, hi everyone. I'm pleased to welcome you to the Distinguished Poet Series at Passaic County Community College in Paterson, New Jersey, conducting now because of COVID via Zoom and live streams. Today is October 3rd, 2020, and we're really happy to have Richard Blanco back with us again. He's been with us before. I always love what he does. I love his workshop. I love his writing. And so I'm so pleased to present him again. Richard was selected by President Obama as the 5th inaugural poet in US history. Richard Blanco is the youngest and first Latino immigrant and gay person to serve in such a role. Born in Madrid to Cuban exile parents and raised in Miami, the negotiation of cultural identity characterizes his 4 collections of poems. City of 100 Fires, which received the Agnes Starrett Poetry Prize from the University of Pittsburgh Press. Direction to the Beach of the Dead, recipient of the Beyond Margins Award from the PEN American Center, and Looking for the Gulf Motel, recipient of the Patterson Poetry Prize and the Tom Gunn Award. He's also authored the memoirs For All of Us, One Today, an inaugural Poet's Journey, and The Prince of Lococos, a Miami Childhood, winner of a Lambda Literary Award. His latest book of poems, How to Love a Country, both interrogates the American narrative, past and present, and celebrates the still unkept promise of its ideals. And I think Richard represents the kept promises of its ideals. Let's welcome Richard Blanco.
Thank you, Maria. I love the way you put that. I'm going to steal that, as they say. Good writers borrow, great writers steal. Yeah. Thanks. So it's wonderful to be back, even virtually, of course. I mean, Poetry Center and us and me have a long, wonderful history, and with Maria especially, wonderful to be back here. Also, as you know, writing is a very solitary endeavor now more than ever. And so I'm really grateful for this opportunity to connect, even if virtually. It still feels nice. So anyway, want to share with you a few poems from the new book. I'm going to start with sharing screen, which I just to give you a little visual sort of multi-sensory presentation here. So as you can imagine, as Maria mentioned, my tenure as presidential inaugural poet, or PIP as I like to call it, changed every part of my life. On a very personal level, as the son of working class immigrants, of Cuban exiles, you know, I wasn't sure that I was quite an American. I wasn't sure that my narrative was really included. And this moment, and ever since then, it's given me a newfound sense at the American table, so to speak, a table that included black beans and yuca and tamales. And that my story as a Latinx gay kid, you know, that was part of it, that has been always part of the American we the people. And what's more, that each of our stories, sort of really understanding that in a democracy, each one of our stories, each one of those people on that mall, each one of our stories is supposedly included in part of that narrative. Of course, narratives also and stories that have been prejudiced against and left out and outright denied, but also understanding that we're working on it, that America is a work in progress, and it's part of the duty of us all in a democracy to make sure that that story keeps on getting written, not just for ourselves, but for those that can't write it yet. And that's kind of like where I end up. So, had to just sneak in that picture in there, the big guy. But that's how this book came about, from that newfound sense of duty of what is my role as a poet in these times. Thinking about poems that had more social conscience, or poems that were more civic minded. And that's, you know, the title of this book says it all, How to Love a Country, which is also a question mark. How to Love a Country. It's also a self-help book, maybe, How to Love a Country, but it really questions the idea of country itself. That's part of the arc of the book, looking at us historically and issues, social political issues that have existed with us long before what we're seeing today, and thinking about how we might move beyond them as well. So anyway, like I said, I'd like to share a few poems from that book. This first poem, this first poem is is actually, the White House asked me to write 3 poems. One was the one I read, obviously, at the inauguration. And this was the 3rd poem I wrote, which was, I turned to my mother's story. This is my mother with me at the inauguration, and one of my favorite pictures of her back in Cuba. I turned to her story as an immigrant and as an exile, and thinking about the incredible leap of faith she made when she left Cuba. Left Cuba 7 months pregnant with me, left her entire family behind, her parents, her 8 brothers and sisters, every single living relative, and realizing in the writing of this poem that my mother is more of an American than I could ever be because of that act of faith. But also, what I wanted this poem to do is to let us see America through an immigrant's eyes, and step into their emotional shoes, so to speak. And what if you had to go through something like my mother did because you had no other choice? How might we fight for what we need to fight for a little bit more? How might we have those conversations that we need to have? How might we, show up a little bit more, and be more present in the idea of a nation and who we are in it? So anyway, here's the poem. It's called Mother Country, or Madre Patria. To love a country as if we've lost one. 1968, my mother leaves Cuba for America, a scene I imagine as if standing in her place. One foot inside a plane destined for a country she knew only as a name, a color on a map, or glossy photos from drugstore magazines. Her other foot anchored to the platform of her patria, her hand clutched around one suitcase, taking only what she needs most. Hand-colored photographs of her family, her wedding veil, the doorknob of her house, a jar of dirt from her backyard, goodbye letters she won't open for years. The sorrowful drone of engines, one last deep breath of familiar air she'll take with her. One last glimpse at all she'd ever known. The palm trees wave goodbye as she steps onto the plain. The mountains shrink from her eyes as she lifts off into another life, to love a country as if you've lost one. I hear her once upon a time, reading picture books over my shoulder at bedtime, both of us learning English, sounding out words as strange as the talking animals and fair-haired princes in their pages. I taste her first attempts at macaroni and cheese, but with chorizo and peppers. And her Thanksgiving turkeys, always dry, but countered by her perfect pork manil and garlic yuca. I smell the rain of those mornings, huddled as one under one umbrella, waiting for the bus to her 10-hour days at the cash register. And at night, zzz, zzz, of her sewing her own blouses and quinceañera dresses for her grown nieces, still in Cuba, guessing at their sizes. And the gown she saw the neighbors to save for a rusty white sedan, no hubcaps, no air conditioning, sweating all the way through our first vacation to Florida theme parks, to love a country as if you've lost one, as if it were you on a plane departing from America forever. Clouds closing like curtains on your country, the last scene in which you're a madman scribbling the names of your favorite flowers, trees, and birds you'd never see again. The color of your father's hair and your mother's eyes, terrified you could somehow, someday, forget these. To love a country. As if I was my mother last spring, hobbling, insisting I help her climb all the way up to the US Capitol as if she were here before you today instead of me. Explaining her tears, her cheeks pink as the cherry blossoms coloring the air that day when she stopped, turned to me, and said, "You know, mijo, I've been thinking. It isn't where you're born that matters. It's where you choose to die. That, that's your country." This is another kind of immigration story, one we're probably much more familiar with. It's in the news all the time, namely the immigration and the U.S.-Mexican border. This poem was based on a photograph, and that's El Rio Grande, the Rio Grande, and part of it where it forms the border. It's a complicated for me because having sort of one foot in either side of these worlds, as a Cuban, as a Latin American, and being an American, and seeing how one-dimensional the story always gets represented. And so I started thinking beyond that, the expected response to this. And I thought the only way I can solve that artistically is to speak in the voice of the river, to let the river give it to humanity, to give it to all of us for the absurdity of borders, especially in the 21st century, borders that are, we know historically are pretty much meant just for the control of power and wealth, and a human construct. So this is, yes, the river again, shaming us all, so to speak, about borders. Complaint of El Rio Grande. I was meant for all things to meet, to make the clouds pause in the mirror of my waters, to be home to fallen rain that finds its way to me, to turn eons of loveless rock into love-sick pebbles and carry them as humble gifts back to the sea, which brings life back to me. I felt the sun flare, praised each star flocked about the moon long before you did. I've breathed air you'll never breathe, listened to songbirds before you could speak their names, before you dug your oars in me, before you created the gods that created you. Then countries, your invention, maps jigsawing the world into colored shapes, caged in bold lines to say, you're here, not there, you're this, not that, to say yellow isn't red, red isn't black, black is not white, to say mine, not ours, to say war, and believe life's worth is relative. You named me. Big river drew me, blue, thick, to divide, to say spick and Yankee, to say wetback and gringo. You split me in two, half of me us, the rest other, but I wasn't meant to drown children, hear mothers' cries. Never meant to be your geography, a line, a border, a murderer. I was meant for all things to meet. The mirrored clouds and sun's tingle, bird songs and the quiet moon, the wind and its dust, the rush of mountain rain, and us. Blood that runs in you is water flowing in me. Both life, both the truth we know. Poem was also based on a photograph. This is a present day photograph of the last recorded lynching in the United States. And it's the year of which might surprise you. And for this poem, I started thinking about all the negative space in this photo, and thinking about how you could drive through the street and not realize the history that there was there. And again, that negative space, and thinking about how racism has sort of is this negative space that we can't always see or acknowledge, or don't want to see or don't want to acknowledge, that thing we've have kept on sweeping under the rug for decades and, well, centuries. Um, and we elected Barack Obama. It was a great threshold moment, and things, but it's also was a kind of a false sense of security, as we saw just months after his presidency, Charlottesville, and what the reckoning that we're having right now in the United States, which is about time. And also, I think in this poem was very difficult for me to write, because I finally gave myself permission to write about racism and to write about race, which I didn't feel I could always do. But that's the very heart of the poem, is that questioning, in some ways too. So anyway, here's the poem. Get a little water here. Easy lynching on Herndon Avenue. What I'd rather not see isn't here. No rope, no black body under white moon swaying limb from a tree, no bloody drops of dew on the 21st of March, 1981. That's in other photos, like a dozen other photos I've gaped at, not wanting to turn away from the snapped necks of the hanged and the mob's smug smirks, asking myself, how could they? Why? Questions not here, not in this photo, a crisp and tranquil snapshot, murder washed out by time, history left uncaptured. What's left now is easier on our eyes, only pale morning light seeping blue into the sky, a backdrop to the necks of the tree bows bowing like swans, innocent of any crime on Herndon Avenue, pictured like any other street, clean sidewalks, no blood, utility poles strung with wires, no rope, a few pavement cracks, no broken boned body. Easier to imagine only this. Groomed children waiting for the bus, grinding to a halt that March morning, the 21st, 1981. Their backpacks zipped with undoubtable history and equations, cartoon lunchboxes filled with fresh ham sandwiches and sweet grapes. Sport coat fathers dashing to work, worried about paychecks and the greenness of their lawns. All-day mothers left tending silk pillows never fluffed enough, scrubbing sinks never white enough, wiping windows never spotless enough. Easier not to ask if anyone saw him, if anyone knew the boy whose mama had named Michael. Michael Donald. Easier to think no one was friendly with Mr. Hayes and Mr. Tiger Knowles, who on the night of March 21st, 1981, drove around looking for something black to kill. They spotted him, age 19, walking home, the body, strangled him first, then slit his throat, the blood, chose a tree to hang him, the rope, Herndon Avenue, 1980. Which tree was it that shook with his last breath? Maybe easier not to look for it, not find it, not make ourselves imagine Michael still on Herndon Avenue, his death still alive since March 21st, 1981. Easier not to look at his shut eyes, wonder what his favorite color or superhero was, if he liked to skateboard or draw, if he heard his mama's cries, my boy, Jesus, my boy. Easier to believe the last words on the lips of his murderers must have been, forgive us. To trust this kind of thing doesn't happen anymore. Stay blind, no rope, no blood, no body to the life of a boy named Michael, invisible in this photo. That is, until we dare to look hard and deep and long enough. This poem was written, Freedom to Marry. It was an organization that was pivotal in turning the tide of on free marriage equality, and for their 10-year anniversary. It was just before the Supreme Court ruling asked me to write a poem for their 10-year anniversary, and which they produced into a short film. You can see it online on YouTube. Just type in "Until We Could." They did a really wonderful job with it. Any case, it's a love poem, I guess, historical love poem to speak of. And what I really liked about this project and about Freedom to Marry is, as a poet, that they changed the language, they changed the messaging, and that really made a difference. And it was about recognizing our humanity in a language that made sense in a different way that maybe didn't make sense in the 1970s, and it worked. So anyway, also, it's the first poem I ever wrote, knowing that it would be a script for a film, for a short film, and so it was really interesting, as an artistic project. Although I thought that it was going to star, maybe Brad Pitt and Ryan Gosling like making out. I don't know. I thought maybe, but it's anyway. I also wanted this poem to perhaps. I hoped it would be used at marriage ceremonies, and it's been a thrill to watch that happen to people. You read this as scripture, in lieu of scripture, at some ceremonies, and just loving how poetry can occupy that space in our lives. Until We Could, for Mark. I knew it then, when we first found our eyes in our eyes, and everything around us, even the din and smoke of the city, disappeared, leaving us alone as if we were the only two men in the world, two mirrors face to face, my reflection in yours, yours and mine, infinite. I knew since I knew you, but we couldn't. I caught the sunlight pining through the shears, traveling millions of dark miles simply to graze your skin, as I did that first dawn I studied you sleeping beside me. Yes, I counted your eyelashes, read your dreams like butterflies flitting under your eyelids and ready to flutter into the room. Yes, I praised you like a majestic creature my God forgot to create. Until that morning of you tame in my arms, first for me to see and name you mine. Yes, to the rise and fall of your body, your every exhale and inhale, a breath I breathed as my own, wanting to keep even the air between us as one. Yes, to all of you. Yes, I knew, but still, we couldn't. I taught you how to dance salsa by looking into my Caribbean eyes. You learned to speak in my tongue while teaching me how to catch snowflakes in my palms, love the gray clouds of your worn out hometown. Our years began collecting in glossy photos, timelining our lives across shelves and walls, glancing back at us, embracing in some sunset, more captivated by each other than the sky blushed plum rose, us, claiming some mountain that didn't matter as much as our climbing it together, us leaning against columns of ruins as ancient as our love was new, or leaning into our dreams at a table flickering candlelight in our full mooned eyes. I knew me as much as I knew us, and yet we couldn't. Though I forgave your blue eyes turning green each time you lied and kept believing you, though we managed to say good morning after muted nights in the same bed, though every door slam told me to hold on by letting us go, and saying, "You're right," became as true as saying, "I'm right," till there was nothing a long walk couldn't solve. Holding hands and hope under streetlights blustering like strings of pearls, guiding us home. Or a stroll along the beach with our dog, the sea washed out by our smiles, our laughter roaring louder than the waves. Though we understood our love was the same as our parents, though we dared to tell them so, and they understood, though we knew. We couldn't. No one could. When fiery kick lines and fires were set for us by our founding mother fathers at Stonewall, we first spoke of defiance. When we paraded glitter, leather, and rainbows, our word then became pride down city streets, demanding just let us be. But that wasn't enough. Parades became rallies, bold words on signs, shouting until we all claimed freedom as another word for marriage and said, let us in, insisted love is love, proclaimed it into all eyes that would listen, at any door that would open, until no's and maybes turned into yeses, town by town, city by city, state by state, understanding us and all those who dared to say enough until the gravel struck into law what we always knew. Love is the right to say, I do, I do, I do. And I do want us to see every tulip we've planted come up spring after spring. 100 more years of dinners cooked over a shared glass of wine and 1,000 more movies in bed. I do, until our eyes become voices speaking without speaking, until like a cloud meshed into a cloud, there's no more me, you, our names, useless. I want you to be the last face I see, your breath, my last. I do. I do. And will. And will. For those who still can't vow it yet, but know love's exact reason as much as they know how a sail keeps the wind without breaking, or how roots dig away into the earth, or how the stars open their eyes into the night, or how a vine becomes one with the wall it loves, or how, when I hold you, you are still rain in my hands. So I'm going to close with a poem in praise of our country. Which I think we could all use a little bit of that these days. For this poem, this is not based on photographs, it's just a visual for you, but for this poem, I just started thinking about patriotism, the good kind, not the egocentric, sort of arrogant kind of patriotism, but the good kind of really, the innocent kind of patriotism that I remember from childhood, from just before we were jaded by parties and debates and anger and division, and we truly believed maybe the ideal words of that founded our nation, that we're still trying to work on. And for that, I turn to a song, America the Beautiful, and which actually would have been such a much better song for a national anthem instead of bombs and rockets and all that shit exploding in the air. Always the war and the war and the war. So anyway, this poem, and it's also wrapped up in a childhood memory, as you'll see. So I'll close on this, and thank you, everyone. America the Beautiful, again. Oh, how I sang, oh, beautiful, like a psalm at church with my mother, her Cuban accent scaling up every vowel. Oh, beautiful, yet in perfect pitch, delicate and tuned to the radiant beams of stained glass light. How she taught me to fix my eyes on the crucifix as we sang our thanks to our Savior for this country that saved us. Our voices, hymns as passionate as the organ piping towards the very heavens. How I sang, for spacious skies, closer to those skies, while perched on my father's sunbeat shoulders, towering above our first 4th of July parade. How the timber through our bodies mingled, breathing, singing as one with the brass notes of the marching band playing the only song he ever learned in English. I dared to sing it at assembly with my teenage voice cracking for amber waves of grain that I'd never seen, nor the purple mountain majesties, but could imagine them in every verse rising from my gut, every exclamation of praise. I belted out until my throat hurt, America, and again, America. How I began to read Nietzsche and doubt God, yet still wish for God to shed his grace on thee and crown thy good with brotherhood. How I still want to sing, despite all the truth of our wars and our gunshots ringing louder than our school bells, our politicians smiling lies at the mic, the deadlock of our divided voices shouting over each other instead of singing together. How I want to sing again, beautiful or not, just to be in harmony from sea to shining sea with the only country I know enough to know how to sing for. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Maria.
The rest of them are muted, so they can't clap, but I'm sure they're clapping in their
They're clapping in there.
presentation. And as a first generation American or second generation American, I really feel in tune with what you're saying. And I remember singing America the Beautiful and just thinking how perfect it was.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid that some of that perfection has been lost for me. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Definitely, but I think we can always keep on trying to bring that song back figuratively. We got to keep on working, right? Towards
I can't run away, although there's
yeah, I know you've done a lot of work in your lifetime
right.
to get that song going and get it right.
Yeah. Wonderful. I loved it. I loved your mother, the imitation of your mother singing the song and the kind of Cuban accent. Beautiful. Really, really a very moving American story. Your mother and of you, and who would imagine that you would be the inaugural poet when
Yeah.
you weren't even born in this country?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it's a really great completion of and also sort of I always think about my mother's sacrifice that she made and how that moment sort of justified maybe that decision in her life, how it came full circle. And also my mother's kind of my lifeline to being an American, ironically, because she sees again this country through immigrants' eyes and holds this country to a certain bar, right? And reminds me of that all the time, right? The things that because I grew up here that we take for granted, as all of us do. And so I love her perspective on that's always teaching me about this country as well as Cuba. So anyway, it's been a pleasure, and we'll see you hopefully in person sometime soon.
Yes, hopefully. We have to get through this sometime. So when we start doing programs in person again, I will invite you back to the Poetry Center and have you do a reading at the Poetry Center in person. Okay.
We'll do that.
Wonderful. Your workshop was fascinating, and I'm
Thank
sure
you.
everyone was very happy. Let's give another round of applause, even silently, to Richard. Good. There they go. Clap,
Bye,
clap.
everyone. Enjoy. Have a great weekend. And
You too, honey.
finish those poems.